Knowledge is a paradox. The more one understands, the more one realizes the vastness of his ignorance.
Throughout Arcane, we're constantly learning through and alongside its characters. When we first see Enforcers, it's through Vi and Powder's perspective, some kids trying to get by. We don't learn about Enforcers, we learn about how the people of Zaun see them. When we see Piltovan politics, it's through Jayce and Viktor's perspective, two inventors trying to help the world. We don't learn about Piltovan politics, but we learn how those politics are stopping our protagonist's progress. But as we get further in, it gets so much muddier. The Enforcers seem malicious, but when we meet characters like Caitlyn, we can see it's because they don't understand Zaun. Hextech seems like a good idea, but when we see people actually use it, we see very quick and abrupt reactions that make us think, maybe they shouldn't. Viktor's right. Knowledge is a paradox. The more information we learn, the less we know what to think of that information, let alone know what to do. And that's what makes Arcane so interesting. That's what makes tragedy so interesting. But why? It puts us in the perspective of the character to understand wrong actions, even if we don't agree with them. And that perfectly describes Viktor's arc throughout the series. As I mentioned in my analysis of Echo, you know a tragedy has done its job right when it has you wondering what if, rather than what now. When big moments happen, you don't just wonder what's next, but instead look back and wonder what could have been. What did they do wrong? What do we wish happened? And that's what Viktor's arc does so well through the idea of hamartia, a flaw a character possesses from the start of the series that eventually leads to their downfall by their story's end. In every stage of his character, Viktor is about ambition, the cost of wanting to change the world without taking a moment to think about what it really means to pursue change. By giving us an absolute masterclass in pursued tragedy, Viktor's arc shows us the cost of ambition. The cost of trying to change the world.
No. Evolution has a destination. Not to combat nature, but to supersede it. The final, glorious evolution.
So what exactly do I mean by a pursued tragedy? What is it that makes a character trying to do nothing but good actually bad? How do we turn one of our beloved protagonists into the show's most threatening antagonist? People love to assign definitive moments to character arcs. This is the moment Walter White became Heisenberg. This is the moment Light became Kira. This is the moment my channel fell off. But what makes a tragic arc good isn't a sudden shift from a guy we like to a guy we don't like. There needs to be a transition, a hint, a foreshadowing, an existing character flaw. Walter was driven by ego even before his empire. Light was a narcissist even before the Death Note. And I was too lazy to make videos even before I went to get milk. Moments that depict falls from grace don't work in a vacuum. They're effective because, like any other story element, they work off the culmination of prior events. They have to be earned. A tragic ending hits hard for a reason, not to combat a character's existing nature, but to supersede it. For their arc's final tragic conclusion. In some cases, it's a moment where existing negative traits fully come to the surface. But more interestingly, in Viktor's case, we get a moment where we realize an objectively positive trait has gone too far. A moment where the pursuit of something good has crossed the line, where our entire view on Arcane's world has changed without our permission.
When you're going to change the world, don't ask for permission.
I don't even know your name.
It's Viktor.
Viktor meets Jayce in his darkest moment. For that part of the story at least. Jayce believes he's lost everything, his research taken away from him, his position lost, and his reputation reduced to a boy meddling with things he doesn't understand. Until Viktor enters his life, a man who seems to be the only one who understands Jayce, and in working together, Jayce becomes the only one who gets Viktor, making the advances around him everyone else thought to be too dangerous for the sake of helping people. He's the kind of guy that recognizes someone's darkest moment when no one else does. He's the kind of guy that tries his best to make sure no one ever has to get there again. At his core, Viktor is two things: compassionate and ambitious. He's a good man who just wants to do good for as many people as he can. How could this be a bad thing? And while the answer to that isn't immediately clear, as his story plays out, we at least know things can't stay the way they are. Viktor is visibly sicker from the first scene we see him post timeskip, both in obvious ways and little. While Jayce uses Hextech gauntlets with ease, Viktor can't even point properly. As he tries drawing with his robotic arm, he breaks the slab he's drawing on. He's trying to create, but he risks the act of destroying. At this point, Viktor grows more focused on his legacy, clawing for more time. He's not concerned with what's gonna happen with the life he has left, but instead, what will happen once it's over. So, he caves into self-experimenting. And it seems triumphant for a second. He learns to run, something he never could, using Hextech, a means no one else ever has. But he hasn't fixed his leg, he's corrupted it. This isn't a triumph, it's the beginning of a downfall, one that culminates in the scene right after. As Viktor grabs the hex core again, so does Skye onto him, the one person other than Jayce who truly cares about him. And even though it's killing her to hold on to him, he doesn't even notice. Viktor gets a chance to stop this, to take his hands off the hex core, but he doesn't notice, he doesn't let go. And by the time he finally does, Skye's already gone. Although it's foreshadowed again and again, this is the most clear character moment that defines Viktor's fatal flaw: ambition. What makes Viktor's role in Season 2 so interesting is, against convention, he's already realized this. He's realized his ambition isn't worth the cost. Until it is. Ambition isn't something that just goes away, it's only human. But it's also just as human to get lost in that ambition, to make a mistake, to forget to do good in chasing great.
We lost ourselves, lost our dream. In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good.
After being completely consumed by the hex core against his wishes, Viktor can heal the sick by evolving them. We know for a fact Viktor means to do good, but at the same time, we remember what happens when that pursuit goes too far. He wants to help people. And while there's nothing wrong with that inherently, we know there's the potential for there to be. Because ironically for Viktor's character, it's only human. Because even if we take a moment to remember the good before the great,
that which inspires us to our greatest good is also the cause of our greatest evil.
this is one of the most interesting lines to me, arguably one of the most important for Viktor, because there are two ways for this to be read. Firstly, how Viktor justifies his coming actions, talking about everyone around him. Secondly, an ironic description of his own character, unknowingly narrating the turn he's about to take. Now that first one is clearly what Viktor himself intends in this. Viktor is right. Viktor concludes that if humanity's evil are all caused by uncontrolled emotion, it's his responsibility to rid them of it. And he gives up his own humanity to do it, at least on the surface. Because in coming to this conclusion, in making this choice, he's also making a mistake driven by his hamartia, his ambition, his compassion. And that's so poetic. In becoming the Machine Herald, he's falling victim to something insanely human. He falls into the exact issue with humanity he believes that he's going to solve. It's the same human characteristic we see in Season 1 and early Season 2 that made us empathize and like his character. While we might not agree with his plan, we can understand why he's doing it as misguided as he is. In taking his compassion and ambition a step too far, he not only becomes the big villain to unite the rest of our characters, but still remains the man we knew before who just wanted to create. This is the turning point, as I mentioned before. It's the culmination of his character built up earlier in the show. Everything that inspired his greatest good is also the cause of his greatest evil. And this is perfectly represented in the final scene of episode 6, wherein metaphorically saying goodbye to his humanity, he literally says goodbye to Skye, the same Skye he killed in season 1. Like before, Viktor and his ambition is desperate to make a change. He turns his back on Skye, making the same mistake we all thought he learnt his lesson from. And that's why when Viktor claims to miss their talks, Skye says,
"No. You won't."
This is the second time Viktor's ambition has killed her. It doesn't matter if this is really Skye or just a representation of his humanity, because to Viktor, she's very real, and he's choosing to let her go. He's intentionally letting go of Skye rather than accidentally. This is probably the best representation of his character arc that we could get. This has happened before. He's still motivated by the same things. Skye is still dying in front of Viktor, and that death still changes his view on ambition forever. Except for one key difference. Skye's loss was originally a reminder of the humanity that stopped his ambition from going too far. But now, she's a representation of the humanity that he's choosing to give up to keep chasing that same ambition. He's making a choice we know he doesn't have to make, one that we don't want him to make, but one that we understand in fitting of his character. His greatest strength is now his greatest flaw. What makes us love Viktor is also what makes us mourn his loss. He's not losing his humanity, he's being consumed by it. He's not wearing a mask, the mask is wearing him. That's why we still care about him when he becomes the ultimate villain of the series, because part of him hasn't changed. We always knew that he was ambitious, compassionate, and while eventually we saw the cost of that ambition, that pursuit is what made us care about him in the first place. And while that's a good thing, we can't help but fear when we'll find that cost again. Only the second time we find it, we don't just get a look at that cost. We realize he's already paid it, and it gives us a moment to look back on what happened to get here. And we can't help but wonder, what if things happened differently? Because
I thought I could bring an end to the world's suffering. But when every equation was solved, all that remained were fields of dreamless solitude. There is no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit.
by the end of the story, we know who Viktor is. Although at a point Jayce made him realize his mistake, it's the same reason his ending isn't tragic in the same way as it is Echo's. This isn't a heroic tragedy, this is a pursued tragedy. From the very start of the series up until this end, even though he's changed on the outside, at his core, Viktor has stayed the same man with the same flaws set up from his introduction. The biggest tragedy is not only that he started off with good intentions, but that those good intentions never really disappeared. Instead, they evolved. Although his views changed for the worse, leading up to that point and even beyond, he hasn't. He's chasing the same thing he always has, and that's why as much as we wish things would have played out differently, there's a part of us that not only knows it didn't, but that there was almost no world in which it would have. Because even though he could see where he went wrong after it was too late, the end of that pursuit became increasingly clear to us before it even happened. There was no prize, and there was nothing we could do about it. And that's the real strength of this type of writing. While heroic sacrifices and tragedies like Echo's gives us a moment to smile and take in the beauty of what it means to do good, it's these types of sad endings, sad stories that let us think about what we can learn in our own lives. Even though fictional characters like Viktor with predetermined paths might not be able to, we have the chance to try and take a look at ourselves from a new perspective. In every action, every flaw, and every strength, we have to ask ourselves, have we crossed the line? What's the cost of our ambition?